Satanic Ritual at the Eurovision Song Contest 2024. Taylor Swift presents Satanism openly on stage. As do numerous other global stars like Madonna, Adele, Pink, and Beyoncé. The Olympic Games are opened and framed with satanic performances. The image of the god Baal can be seen directly on stage. Baal has been known for real child sacrifices for 4,500 years. The apocalyptic rider on the pale horse, Death, is staged grand scale. Right in line with the guiding principle of the self-proclaimed elite.
1/4 of humanity must be eliminated from the social body. We are in charge of God's selection process for planet Earth. He selects, we destroy. We are the riders of the pale horse, Death.
We are the first species on the face of this earth to be aware of evolution, to be aware that we are affecting our own evolution by everything that we do. The babies we eat, the food we eat, the wars we fight, the babies we eat.
In Toulouse, a huge festival is celebrated with giant idol figures, which, in mysticism, stand for human and child sacrifice. The US pop singer Miley Cyrus, who used to play Hannah Montana in a TV series, sings of Satanist Aleister Crowley, who publicly propagates the blood sacrifice of infants and glorifies the satanic blood rituals of the world wars. Ozzy Osbourne dedicated an entire song to this Satanist. Led Zeppelin sang about Aleister Crowley's house, and the Beatles featured him on the cover of one of their albums. Also, the musicians and singers David Bowie and Michael Jackson appeared with Satanist Crowley. He was expelled from Italy by Mussolini in 1923 when his sex magic satanic rituals became known. Marina Abramovich, the ambassador of Ukraine and its warmonger Zelensky, continues Crowley's legacy. The method involves dehumanization, humiliation, and cannibalism. Lady Gaga is one of her graduates. She left a bathtub full of blood in a hotel room. Abramovich was sponsored by the Rothschild Foundation. According to the ex-Satanist John Todd, the Rothschilds are regarded as the mouthpiece of Lucifer, as the leaders of the satanic cult. Glorification of Satanism, the Lucifer cult, and cannibalism are publicly propagated by hyped-up stars. Germany's ZDF has produced and broadcast a Satanism commercial paid for by the taxpayers with compulsory media fees. Halloween is the supreme holiday among Satanists, a festival of horror and death. Its origins lie in the Samhain festival, where people were sacrificed. Irish actress and singer Tara Lee presents Satanism in pure, unaltered form. She drinks blood on camera and speaks of small children that she uses twice a week for blood transfers. She calls it taking out the trash. Then she shows her current garbage, which looks like a wrapped child's corpse. After showing the Baphomet sign to the camera, posing as the devil, she speaks the words,
"I want you to kill one more. I want you to kill one more."
Hollywood actor Matthew Perry spent years gathering information to expose a pedophile ring at the heart of the Hollywood entertainment industry. He wrote a revealing book about it and announced his revelations on Instagram. He was found dead in the bathtub at the age of 54. The same fate befell Isaac Kappy, Paul Walker, Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, Avicii, and Anne Heche, who also publicly announced her revelations about Hollywood. Beyoncé has been accused of witchcraft, murder, and practicing black magic by her former drummer Kimberly Thompson. Beyoncé likes to present herself with the Gotthard Tunnel entrance, which was inaugurated with satanic ceremonies. According to Australian survivor Fiona Barnett, actress Nicole Kidman was 11 years old when her father Anthony Kidman led the ritual flaying of a blonde boy. His daughter, the actress Nicole Kidman, sat in the front row at this ritual murder. In an interview, Sandra Bullock talks about an exclusive, expensive penis facial treatment made from the foreskin of newborn babies. Such a treatment costs $650. The Austrian-Irish artist Gottfried Helnwein glorifies the bloody cult of Satan in his art and is celebrated as a hero by the media and the church. Helnwein cooperates with the Satanist Marilyn Manson. Manson stands for pedophilia and violence. His girlfriend reports of torture, abuse, rape, and death threats. Helnwein also works with Rammstein singer Till Lindemann, who also glorifies satanic rituals and murder in his art. Hermann Nitsch, who propagated murder as a component of art and published photos of murdered children, was honored with highest awards. The satanic opera Sancta was performed in Stuttgart, Germany just recently with completely naked actors covered in blood. They practice kinky sex on stage, wound each other involving real blood, desecrate the cross, and drag the Christian faith through the mud in extremely bad taste. The opera was so disgusting that 18 people had to be treated for nausea or shock during the first two performances. Satanic values are being propagated and openly displayed at fashion shows and on television. Actress Megan Fox publicly admitted that she and her fiancé would occasionally drink their own blood and perform rituals when the moon is full. The latest Disney series, Little Demon, is about the devil's 13-year-old daughter, whose mother is deeply involved in Satanism. And the devil greets people at the 128th German Medical Assembly.
Is all this just art and culture? No. In The Blood Cult 1 and 2, Lois Zazek already published 138 reports from victims of satanic ritual violence and 77 witness statements on these cruel ritual practices. These victims and witnesses identified a total of 82 perpetrators by name and pointed to elite perpetrator networks. You are now watching the third episode of Blood Cult with another 247 victims and 135 witnesses who testify to satanic ritual violence and gruesome sacrificial rituals. Among other things, the victims identify 172 perpetrators and accomplices by name. The testimonies of survivors worldwide are independently from each other absolutely identical and paint one and the same picture as KLA TV founder Ivo Zazek summarized it in 2015.
You need to know that these satanic powers have meanwhile developed in such a way that in every country, in every culture, child sacrifices have been carried out as the norm to appease the spirits. That is the crazy teaching of Satan, of Lucifer, that in the end there always had to be child sacrifice, murder and manslaughter and endless bloodshed to appease the gods. The same in all countries. And the carnage got bigger and bigger, the violence got worse and worse, the degeneracy, the sexual degeneracy, and all these things became more and more dramatic.
And they have a baby with and the Monsignor sacrifices the baby.
They sacrificed the children and then they killed the baby.
There I would be taken to the group that would perform the satanic ritual abuse. So this is a group well known across the world, Freemasons, and so they got a boy and he was sacrificed. Freemasons have lodges throughout the world, but in our country.
I can also remember a ritual murder of a baby, and then I was forced to kill the baby with a gun to my head.
These people did. I saw children being killed, and I saw babies being killed. And they would practice a kind of blood drinking and cannibalism as part of their religion.
And I was also present at child sacrifices. It was a child about my age. It was then tied up and laid on a stone altar. And they cut open his chest and cut out his heart.
Like, how can you not, like, your heart not break, when you think about, like, just a little innocent being, like, going through something like this. He castrated him. And then cut open his stomach, so disemboweled him, and then stabbed him in the heart before pushing him, off the altar and into the fire. That's what they had done with each thing. Sorry, with each victim. It's hard to say, how can you get more fucked up, than that,
You know what? Leave me alone with it. I don't want anything to do with it. It's far too bad for me. Otherwise, I'll have a nervous breakdown.
I don't want to deal with this topic. I protect myself from it. No, not this topic.
Und wer hat das Kind gefragt?
And who asked the child if it could endure this torture? Who asked the child whether it would like to deal with the topic of Satanism and ritual abuse and ritual murders? For example, this child from the Frankfurt area was forced to watch as a boy was lying on an altar and had his calf cut and slowly bled to death. The little girl fainted.
They were satanic ritual orgies. Get it straight. It wasn't just adults in these parties. The adults were responsible for the child sex slaves that were in the party. And one of those children were me. Child Protective Services is your supplier. Yeah, I was at a Diddy party. I was one of the party favors. I pray to God that this is the day. I pray to God that this is the time, because all the victims deserve some type of justice, and it's just a matter of taking accountability and somebody saying, we are fucking sorry that we didn't hear you guys forever ago. There are people who are dead. There are babies who have lost their lives because nobody was listening. And now everybody, I want to listen. You are late.
This was just one of the 120 victims to press charges in the P. Diddy pop star scandal. So far, you've only seen 162 seconds of footage of a total of 8 victims from Blood Cult 3. But in this film, I've processed 65 hours of film and sound material compiled from 247 victims and 135 witnesses. All gruesome statements about satanic ritual violence. And I will not even mention the most perverse and inhumane, abhorrent acts in this documentary film, because as already stated in the Bible, in the letter to the Ephesians, that these deeds that occur in secret are too horrific and shameful to even be mentioned. But directly in the next sentence it says that we must expose these works of the kingdom of darkness, those done in secret. We must expose them in public so that they will be punished by the light. I'm going to show you this passage from the Bible as translated by my father, Ivo Sasek, from the original biblical manuscript. And exactly that is the reason why I've summarized so many testimonies in this film, to bring these outrageous deeds to light and finally let these helpless ones be heard. Because it needs you and it needs me so that this can finally come to an end once and for all. It needs light. I summarized all this material as briefly as I could with sweat and tears. Sometimes I had to run to the toilet in between because all these witnessed atrocities made me sick to my stomach. Please don't look away. These victims need exactly you. Please share this video widely. The P. Diddy scandal that recently came to light involves decades of intrigue, abuse, blackmail, human trafficking, and fatal violence. According to the Public Prosecutor's Office, Diddy ran a criminal network. Of the 120 victims who pressed charges, 25 were minors. The youngest was only 9 years old. Drugs were often mixed into the victims' drinks in order to make them sexually submissive. P. Diddy is one of Hollywood's most influential string pullers. His network of contacts also includes high-profile politicians and former presidents. Rapper Suge Knight said, "The raids had not been aimed at Diddy, but to destroy incriminating footage of powerful men." The same thing happened in the Dutroux case in Belgium, in the Teichmeister case in Austria, and in the Epstein case in the USA, as well as in the Oettelaeren case on the island of Jersey, and in the Zandvoort case in the Netherlands. Even when Manuel Mittas published incriminating material in the Austrian Kampusch case, showing that it was not just a single perpetrator, he was beaten up, his apartment was burned down, his electricity was cut off, his bank account was terminated, and so on and so forth. Everything is being done to portray individual perpetrators as guilty. Incriminating film material that could point to a pedocriminal network is always the first to be confiscated. Hundreds of witnesses and victims reveal in their testimonies what kind of incriminating evidence can be seen on these films. Namely, well-known faces of world celebrities who abuse and torture children, and sometimes torture them to death. According to witnesses and victims, it is a globally organized pedocriminal network of the would-be elite. P. Diddy's parties have included celebrities such as music stars Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Usher, Meek Mill, Rick Ross, French Montana, and movie stars Cuba Gooding Jr., Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, and a whole list of other highly paid actors, Oscar winners, and even major Hollywood film directors. Here you see Tom Hanks, for example, with little girls who are dressed up and wear makeup like grown-up women. Britain's Prince Harry also seems to be a good buddy of P. Diddy. Investigative journalist Liz Crokin reveals that the Epstein ring had links to P. Diddy. On the list of the high-ranking individuals known to have met with Epstein, you can also find Ariana de Rothschild, for example. Witness Jaguar Wright had rescued 3 women from Jeffrey's pedophile island. She explains in tears that the most terrible abuses were broadcast live on the internet. Among the victims of the scandal surrounding P. Diddy, you'll find the name of well-known Canadian pop singer Justin Bieber. Back in 2017, an article was published about Justin Bieber, who witnessed a cruel child sacrificial ritual. Managers from the record industry are said to have attended the top-secret party and, according to Bieber, drank the blood of the tortured baby. This, he says, was the worst moment of his life. Justin Bieber canceled his world tour following this because he needed a break from the music industry. I quote Bieber, "Pedophiles rule the music industry." Of course, such statements are quickly hushed up or questioned in public. But there are hundreds of victims and witnesses who say the same thing. Let's listen to some further victims and testimonies.
Blood Cult 3. More victims and witnesses report of satanic ritual abuse.
Sue, from Southern California, survived cruel torture and ritual abuse. She was present when a child was burned at the stake. David Schurter's parents were Satan worshippers, so from childhood on he was a victim of sexual abuse and satanic rituals. In one satanic lesson, he had to murder a boy who was tied to a chair.
Force you to kill another human being or another child. They will put you with that child so you develop an emotional bond so that the trauma is even more exacerbated. For me, it was a nightmare from beginning to end. It was just a total, utter nightmare.
The survivor, Ellen, also reports on such rituals and on the indescribable feelings of guilt at having harmed children.
I think the worst thing was really seeing how other children were tortured, or how I myself had to do things to other children. I think it's worse than what happened to me.
Karen reports how in a ritual she was forced to massacre 20 to 30 Vietnamese refugee children in the worst possible way. Initially, her hand was guided with the knife, but then she had to do it herself. All the boys died. Ali Harrison testifies that her experiences of ritual violence are consistent with the testimony of other victims. She has met several people who have also been victims of satanic ritual violence. These crimes were not just committed by 2 to 3 people, but took place within a community, she says. Nina experienced ritual violence as well, starting from the age of 1. She was involved in brutal killings, including skinning and dismemberment of still living victims, as we hear time and time again. Like the other victims, she was deliberately programmed by means of electric shocks and torture, as always to carry out what her tormentors wanted from her.
I think I experienced pretty much every form of abuse, of torture. It went as far as murder, even with human blood. I was also put under a lot of pressure to never say anything. I got into the whole thing through my grandfather. He's a Freemason.
Eveline experienced ritual violence in the Swiss cantons of Geneva and Vaud. She had to witness her siblings being raped and had to cut up human flesh. Elizabeth Schaefer experienced satanic ritual violence from the age of 11 and had to watch as a 13-year-old girl's newborn baby was being tortured in the cruelest way. She had to kill this baby herself. Her hand was guided. This is also what other victims of these satanic rituals recounted. Eva Frey reports on her experiences with organized violence and the cruel medical human experiments in the Swiss hospitals of Lausanne and Basel. She was raped there, became pregnant, and after giving birth in secret, her child was mutilated in front of her very own eyes. For Rachel, the worst experiences were these ritual killings of babies.
There are priests that little boys, Catholic priests. There are people that kill little babies and take their organs or their blood and drink it. There are people that eat human flesh. I never wanted to be in this club where you join something, you make a deal with the devil, you sell your fucking soul, and then you have to hide for the rest of your life. I'm not playing this game.
They drive all over the country, dropping off the children to various occult ritual night events so that the children can be used or dedicated or murdered. At that point, it's like you either get sacrificed, murdered, you become one of them, or you facilitate what they're doing. They would actually had a contest like who had the best food, cannibalized food, with demonic sacrifice, cannibalized body parts in it.
They eat babies. That is not bullshit. It's true. They're full-on vampires. They love the taste of human flesh and they drink human blood. They do.
Carrie Olaya recounts for over 3 hours about cruel satanic rituals, abuse, and torture that she survived. Among other things, she was abused from an early age by her biological father and used for child pornography. The FBI trained him in this. He also repeatedly watched snuff videos in which children were tortured and killed in various ways on live camera.
The more power they can exert, and the more like suffering and pain, which is evidence of the power they're exerting, that they can witness, the happier, the more they get off, that's their addiction,
Perversions are coming, where it's only about murders, about only the worst possible deeds, where sex degenerates into brutality via sadomasochism. It will lead to torturing. The pleasure in torture, the pleasure in mutilating, torturing, eating bodies alive, doing something insane. It won't stop at pornography.
Now, this can be dismissed as exaggerated or as false prophecy, but let's take a look at what the well-known German punk band Die Toten Hosen sang 30 years ago. Lead singer Campino was obviously not disgusted, but had a lot of fun singing about these atrocities. Interestingly, Campino, of all people, was invited to the state banquet for King Charles last year. We'll come back to this later on in the program. What Die Hosen, the band, sang about so cheerfully has unfortunately become a horrible reality for children like 13-year-old Manuel Schadwald. This Manuel Schadwald was sold to the snuff film producer Warwick S. On a yacht belonging to Garrett Yu, the head of the Zandvoort child pornography ring, Manuel was murdered on camera during a snuff film production. A prominent audience was present. As part of her investigations, social worker Gina Pardenz came across this snuff video showing this murder of Manuel Schadwald and the killing of a girl. Pardenz was murdered while trying to hand over this video evidence to the investigating authorities. The videos featured prominent perpetrators. After extensive research, investigative journalist Oliver Greif has published his investigative work, The Case of Manuel Schadwald and the Zandvoort Network. Even the German government's Commissioner for Abuse confirms, I quote, "Children are even being killed in front of running cameras." Former Scorpions bassist Ralf Riekemann also testified in an interview that there are people who will pay up to $100,000 to see a human being being murdered.
There are several reports of child sexual abuse in connection with rituals in Germany. This has now taken on relatively large numerical dimensions. All Satanists have been abused as children. All of them. I can't imagine any normal person who would do something so horrible, repulsive, disgusting, so brutally humiliating, who would even be capable of such a thing.
The ethnology professor Dr. Elizabeth Roth speaks over a dozen languages and had good contacts to the Vatican. She has written 4 volumes in which she reveals, I quote, "It is the blood money drinkers, the Satanists, who breed children to kill without birth certificates. The intention is child slavery, sexual child abuse, and child torture to adrenalize the blood until the children are murdered in order to drink their optimized blood in satanic circles within occult ceremonies." According to R.D. Steele, ex-U.S. government advisor, I quote, "Plane loads of undocumented children are imported. Most of them are so abused and tortured that they usually don't survive 2 years."
I've passed details of people who are engaged in child trafficking into the UK. Names of all those. They've gone to the government. Nobody wants to act. Nobody wants to act about it. But I gave the government the names of the people and the name of the company they're laundering the money through, where the children were being taken. It's gone to MI5, it's gone to the National Crime Agency, no one will act. And then when you see the names, you see why.
Nathan Reynolds became a slave to the military-industrial complex. He was also used as a courier to transport adrenochrome vials to Arizona for delivery to numerous members of the Mormon Church.
learn how to kill somebody in under 2 seconds, because that was kind of the whole name of the game. So you just got to learn how to kill people super fast. And when you're a child, you have to learn how to do that from different methods than somebody who is a grown adult. And so they have different forms of combative training systems, and they use a lot of Filipino martial arts and things like Salat.
Diana was sold to the U.S. government as a child for secret experiments and torture by the military. She reports on a network of underground military bases called DUMBs, Deep Underground Military Bases, and tunnels that are also located under colleges and universities. For example, under Yale University. This elite university has produced 5 future U.S. presidents, as well as numerous Supreme Court judges and various foreign heads of state. A secret society at Yale University called Skull and Bones has also produced leading figures in politics and business, including 3 U.S. presidents. One of these DUMBs is located under Camp David, the recreation area set apart for U.S. presidents in office. With this in mind, it is completely unrealistic to believe that the U.S. military or the U.S. government would ever voluntarily vacate these DUMBs. The Turkish journalist Serhat Tokmak has been researching the tunnel systems in Turkey for years. For example, he discovered 3 tunnel systems under an orphanage and observed who comes and goes, and is now bringing all of this to the light.
MK Ultra was a CIA project. These were the most brutal methods of torture. They tried to find out how the human brain works. What do you have to do for a consciousness to split off, or for a person to do exactly what I want? How do I create a sex slave? And much more. They worked with electric shocks, with the most brutal rapes, with satanic rites. They practiced everything, really everything, that God has forbidden. This power elite is so obsessed with power that they even beat their own children bloody. So all these programs that they do to other children, they do to their children too, just to secure power. Politicians are blackmailed in 2 ways. On the one hand with pedophilia, and on the other with money.
The heart of evil of these groups, these satanic groups, is underground, in tunnel systems. In tunnel systems. That's where evil broods. That's where they create their energy. That's where they generate and perform their rituals. That's where they generate their power. Basically, we already have evil by the scruff of the neck because people know about it now. Because our generation is different. We want to find out about, we want to explore, we want to change this world. And we can no longer bear the evil here. And I'll tell you something else. Nadia Marcinko, Jeffrey Epstein's private pilot, has admitted that countless children were kidnapped in the 1999 earthquake in Turkey and taken to the USA in private jets. And even in 2023, from the earthquake in Turkey, thousands of children are still reported missing today, rescued alive from the rubble, but then picked up by strange white cars under the pretext of taking the children to hospital, and the children never turned up again. So there's a big movement going on in Turkey right now in terms of child pedophilia, organ trafficking, and so on. Let's all take this seriously, put the focus on it, people. It's the breeding ground of evil. If we look into this, then we can transform the evil in this world into light, so to speak, and look forward to a better future.
Yes, exactly right. We already have evil by the collar because people know about it. That's why it's important that you share this video, spread it widely. Then all of this won't last, dear friends. I could go on forever here sharing the stories of victims and witnesses of the blood cult, but the movie would be far too long. So at this point, I'll just show you the names of other victims and witnesses of ritual violence and MK Ultra torture who have come forward. Behind every name, there's a story, there's a person, there's a whole documentary. In the documentary film Les Survivants, which is currently showing in French cinemas, 6 more survivors have come forward. And I won't repeat all the names of the victims from episodes 1 and 2 of The Blood Cult here. Survivor Karin from Germany testified on Domain, a German radio talk show, and other witnesses and investigators are also resolutely exposing the satanic ritual abuse that is taking place worldwide. I have detailed information, reports, and reliable sources for all of these witnesses. I've stored all the extensive disclosures in various places and backed them up several times. Almost all victims and witnesses of satanic ritual violence speak of a self-appointed power elite as a worldwide network of perpetrators.
Blood Cult 3. More victims and witnesses report on an elitist perpetrator network.
I was trafficked overseas in many countries to high-profile satanic members. In the UK, the Queen, a USA Vice President, a USA diplomat, a prominent UK rock star, 2 very well-known celebrities in the States, Prime Ministers in the UK and government officials in Ireland, government officials, doctors and teachers in New Zealand.
The survivor Hayes grew up in a satanic cult family and has experienced ritual violence in numerous countries. She was also in the White House.
They are still very proud of being powerful, proud of their generational line, their bloodline. People look at them as very good situated people, like they are judges, lawyers, criminal investigators, customs officers. My grandfather was a psychiatrist. My grandmother was teaching in a university about psychology. People like that.
Hayes mentions manors and castles, for example in Heidelberg, Germany, and public grounds as crime scenes. Germans and British work very closely together.
And the fact of the matter is that it's everywhere, and it's happening mostly in the elite circles, our government, our church leaders, and corporations, big corporations. All the people at the head of those things are usually Satanists. And so it's very important for our culture, for our world, that this be exposed and stopped. It is what is making things so dark on this planet.
And dear viewers, this is precisely why we are exposing these atrocities. Survivor Dia Heibel and many other victims and witnesses report that the entire judicial system is riddled with perpetrators or judicial staff who were and still are put in precarious situations and blackmailed. That's why there is no justice for the victims of satanic ritual violence. See the extensively researched KLA TV documentary, Scandal, Judiciary Involved in Pedocriminal Networks.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who dug there who are no longer alive. They've simply been killed. Others have been imprisoned in the last few years who were onto the trail of these structures and the rings of ritual sexual violence, for example, the Natalie and Chantal cases. And those who are currently in prison are then placed in the right-wing corner. They are defamed, framed, and portrayed as Reichsbürger, Reich citizens, but they were active in child protection.
The former Chief of Staff Officer, Max Eder, for example, was arrested on charges of being a citizen of the Reich and a right-wing extremist. He was able to verify the information in the Natalie case and notarized it. After his expert report was published on the Natalie case, he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt in Munich. His apartment was searched several times. Eder's driver was followed on the highway on his way to Germany and was involved in an accident. All evidence of the special operations in the Dams, in the Basel Triangle, the bunker facilities in the Black Forest, and the Lake Constance area was secured by Eder and deposited with lawyers and notaries. The evidence shows the interconnections between politics, authorities, and public offices.
Excerpt from his letter dated May 1st, 2023. I was able to gather a wealth of material, which includes pictures, videos, and names. This list also includes the names of politicians right up to the highest levels, for whom it would understandably be more than unpleasant if I were to publish it.
Anyone who reports child abuse by official or state bodies will be prosecuted. They are all being torn apart. publicly torn apart because the media landscape is no longer doing what they should be doing, namely being the fourth instance of power. No, they join forces, they ally themselves with the investigating authorities, even with the courts, and tear people apart beforehand. We no longer have a proper judiciary. We certainly don't have a proper public prosecutor's office. We know that we have politicians who are pedocriminals. We know that we have judges and public prosecutors, police chiefs who are pedocriminals. And it's being covered up. This cover-up is done by putting those who speak up behind bars. Quite simply, so that they are as untrustworthy as possible, because they are state terrorists or, what do I know, Reichsbürger, whatever a Reichsbürger is supposed to be.
Dr. Christidis herself has been subjected to legal proceedings for years because of her commitment against child abduction and child abuse. A total of 82 criminal cases were brought against her. Time and again, attempts are apparently being made to silence her. Laurent Louis, a Belgian politician, presented clear evidence that the official version of the scandal surrounding child molester, Marc Dutroux, cannot be true. Here's an excerpt from his speech to Parliament.
Pedophiles still enjoy protection, which is only because they are part of the ruling powers. They are the ones who influence jurisdiction. How else can one explain the fact that those who want to find the truth are persecuted and everything is done to silence them? Since when is a member of parliament not allowed to present evidence that proves that the version of the courts is not compatible with the truth?
Instead of receiving praise and recognition for his work, Louis became the target of a hate campaign in Belgium. Defamation, harassment, house searches, censorship of his website, legal proceedings were initiated against him, and a psychiatric report was created on him. He was sentenced to a fine of 50,000 euros and 20 months in prison for calling the Belgian Prime Minister a pedophile in Parliament. However, the facts he uncovered in the Dutroux case continue to be hushed up.
Today I'm going to address a topic that I haven't dared to tackle for a long time, because it's simply too dangerous, namely the unspeakable evil of Satanists and blood drinkers. I am in possession of over a dozen notarized statements about such events. For example, a former victim, a woman who had to stab her twin sister in the heart when she was 4 years old. And the participants, namely the crème de la crème of society and politics, then cannibalized the little girl and drank her blood and ate her organs. The whole thing is so outrageous that it's beyond belief, and that we are governed by such people in every respect. When a senior public prosecutor wanted to start the investigation, he was dead the next day.
And our FBI is corrupt, the Supreme Court is corrupt, the Justice Department is corrupt, the news media is corrupt, the whole country is corrupt, because we've walked away from Almighty God.
Anyone who thinks you can build a career in this society without being part of evil is mistaken. When you see some pop stars who have achieved a great career, or movie actors or artists, you think that they did it on their own. Far from it. They are part of the system.
The successful professional boxer Ryan Garcia, who himself was a victim of abuse and a witness to satanic rituals, explains how influential personalities are bought by means of so-called sponsorship contracts, so that they only adhere to the predetermined political agendas, for example, on LGBTQ. By signing such a contract, for example, for $50 million, this personality is then only reported positively and is pushed in the media. But once you've taken the money, you belong to the inner circle of Hollywood Illuminati. So if you then go to an after party, all the rooms are bugged and something nefarious will happen in the house, and from that point on, you can be linked to it as an accomplice. So the blackmail is perfect. The clinical psychologist, therapist, and independent journalist Joachim Hagopian has written a series of books on pedophilia and empire, Satan, sodomy, and the deep state. He has a master's in clinical psychology and has worked in the mental health field with abused children and adolescents for a quarter of a century. In summary, he testifies to thoroughly exposing today's global child sex trafficking network, which operates at the highest levels of power and primarily serves to blackmail prominent politicians and entertainers. Even the founder of the Satanic Church, Anton Chandor LaVey, himself testifies that most of the members of his Satanic Church are professionals, businessmen, and generally people from responsible, respected circles.
Blood Cult 3: Victims and Testimonies in Connection with Schools.
Chris Stevens, a former pupil of Aldenheim School, who has since adopted the stage name Phoenix Caspian, breaks his silence. King Charles and close friends raped and tortured hundreds of children, including himself. At this British private elite boarding school, children were systematically subjected to ritual rape and gruesome torture methods in order to turn them into perpetrators and puppets of the cruel system. One example of this is Baron Richard Vincent, who, as a General Staff officer during the Irish War, brought much suffering and misery to the population.
Not only were teachers like Pickford, Pullman, and Twelves raping students, but the effect of their abuse induced older students to rape, harass, beat, and torment those younger than them. As just one example, students Oliver Jones and Dev Patel would regularly abuse me.
Phoenix Caspian describes cruel torture rituals intended to shut off the children's memories. The school is run by the English royal family as a Masonic temple. Ritual abuse of children is practiced here as an occult religion. Prince Andrew is alleged to have abused children at Aldenheim School together with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. His brother, the reigning King Charles, regularly attended the same school together with the well-known pedophile Jimmy Savile. According to witnesses, the royal family appears to be deeply involved in these heinous acts. Philippa testifies, for example, to having seen the Queen chop off a girl's head. Queen Elizabeth's cousin, Princess Alexandra, was patron of a foster home for girls. And this gave her friend, serial rapist Jimmy Savile, access to the facility to organize special outings. It later became known that children were raped in camps organized by Savile. Prince Andrew's links to Epstein and the victims' allegations against him are well known. Last year, another witness came forward who saw Prince Andrew sexually abusing 2 children in a club in Kiev. Even the next generation of royals was introduced to these debaucheries at an early age. Rike Schwan, who was born into an Illuminati family in the same bloodlines as the royals, testifies to horrific events during her visits to Buckingham Palace with Princes William and Harry. She reports about how she and her twin sister had to make movies with the princes in which they had to kill and eat other children. In another visit, she was taken to a cellar where there were cages lined up with children in them, and Harry wanted Rika to choose some to be slaughtered. There were 5 children, and they were killed. They killed them all in the palace park. They bathed in their blood. That's the worst thing that she can remember. The actress Emma Watson, known from Harry Potter movies, completed part of her acting training at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, whose patron is the Regent of the British Crown, currently King Charles III. There, she was subjected to a brutal training. For example, she was almost drowned in a pool by fellow students. Her classmate, Phoenix Caspian, explains why these training sessions were held. I quote,
"Those who run the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, short RADA, presumably seek to train great actors, but with a tremendous retention. These trained actors must remain under the control of the trainers. Just as a soldier is brutalized into following orders above all else, so too did I witness myself and others militarized by RADA, effectively programmed never to use our acting skills to unseat establishment power, only to advance it."
Also in the Haut-de-la-Garenne children's home, older children were incited by staff to attack and rape younger children. Former student 59-year-old Peter Hannaford reported. He himself was, as a 12-year-old, a victim of such acts of violence almost every night, as he said, at the children's home. Other witnesses also reported that rape of girls as well as boys in all age groups was on the order of the day. Numerous children were also sexually abused at the McMartin Kindergarten in Manhattan Beach. Tunnels were discovered under the kindergarten, and the scandal became known as the McMartin case. But there are also scandals like this in our part of the world. Andreas Huckele attended the Odenwald School and wrote a book about his traumatic experiences. He was subjected to sexual assault almost daily at school. The 9-year-old Max was also experiencing martyrdom at the Austrian elementary school Ulrichkirchen Schleinbach, Kronberg. The boy had already been subjected to such severe satanic ritual violence by his own father that contact has now been banned. However, the violence was now continued by his classmates, who tormented him so constantly and injured him so badly that he had to undergo several operations and be taken to an emergency room. The classmates were incited by the class teacher to commit these acts, some of which took place in her presence. One of her tormentors is the son of the children's welfare officer. The principal denies and covers up the deeds. While pediatricians recommend homeschooling, the authorities prohibit it. The court imposes a penalty of $5,000 on the mother because Max was unable to attend an assessment appointment after the emergency intervention. This pattern of all the authorities conspiring against the mothers in spite of them knowing better can unfortunately be observed in many other cases.
Child abduction, a proven means of the satanic sect to bring children under their control.
Little Robert from France told his mother that he had been repeatedly sexually abused by his father and that his father took part in satanic rituals in which he wore black robes. Despite the evidence found in photos and videos of Robert and his father, the court ruled that the father could continue to have contact with Robert. Both of Dalila Zadak's 2 children reported that they were severely abused during visits to the divorced father. They reported satanic rituals in which other children were killed. While the mother was initially able to obtain a contact ban, she later had to experience how all the authorities involved in the case turned against her. Psychological reports were even demanded from her and not from the father, in which it was diagnosed that she had made up the children's experiences herself. The children were taken away from her by police force. She was not allowed to see them for 1.5 years and then only for 1 hour a month. After the children were abducted, several attempts were made to take her life.
People can't believe that children demonstrably have to grow up with pedocriminal fathers against their will, torn from their beautiful homes. It's impossible to understand that. Of course, it's hard to believe that child welfare officers, experts, judges, public prosecutors all work together in this construct. This is a mafia, a child-stealing mafia. Because, of course, there are huge business models behind them.
The girl Luna survived ritual violence. Today she's 16 years old. She took part in manhunts and had to kill people herself. There were parties where bad people cooked and ate babies. A man was nailed to an upside-down cross, tortured and killed. She had to meet famous people on private islands who were very evil. She recalls how politicians and heads of state, who in public are enemies, attended the same kinky parties together. She recognized these famous personalities on television, on the internet, or on posters. Luna's personal concern: the higher up someone is, the less you can trust them. Her mother Anna, who looked after the child alone and rescued her from these circles, was attacked from all sides, persecuted and defamed, and received no help from any authority. Some slandered Anna and even claimed that she had only talked her daughter into these terrible things. There was also no therapeutic help offered, and when therapists tried to get involved in the case, they were shut down, fired, or suddenly disappeared. Luna and Anna had to flee. A very close friend who wanted to help them and had important documents on the case was suddenly found dead, and the documents have disappeared. Another method used by the authorities or perpetrators to remove children from the protection of their mothers is, quote, parental alienation syndrome, PAS. This theory was developed by the American child psychiatrist Richard Alan Gardner, who had also published various pro-pedophile articles. Gardner, together with Alfred Kinsey and Sigmund Freud, attributed sexual needs to children, but it was always only about legitimizing pedocriminality or child rape. He also advocated to view bestiality or zoophilia and necrophilia, so sex with dead bodies, as a natural form of human sexual behavior. Gardner claimed, for example, that children who no longer want to meet their father after the divorce have been manipulated by the caregiving mother. In the USA, he has appeared in court as an expert witness in custody cases in several hundred cases, where he also recommended in blatant cases of abuse allegations that the accused parent should at least be given joint custody, even if the child itself refused visits with this parent. He insinuated that the children had only made up the sexual abuse. In one such custody dispute where Gardner was appointed as an expert witness, the 3 sons of a couple refused to visit their father because he had been violent. Gardner testified in court that the children had been manipulated and suffered from PAS. The judge then ordered the boys to continue their visits with their father. One of the boys was found dead a short time later. Despite these blatantly wrong decisions, it is still common practice to take children away from the custodial parent, usually the mother, and award custody to the abusive parent, usually the father. Or the children are sent to a home, as happened to Corinne Fonseca in Switzerland. She reports that after her divorce, her 2 daughters, aged 6 and 8, were taken away from her without prior notice by an 8-member task force and placed in a home. There were clear signs that the children had been abused by their father, and the children had flatly refused to visit their father. The father even admitted to the Child Prosecution Authority that he had pedophile fantasies. But he successfully denounced the mother to the child protection authorities with unfounded accusations, and the result was that the children were taken away from her. For over 3.5 years now, the 2 girls have been denied any contact with their mother. Before the total ban on contact, the daughters had said that they had been subjected to abuse. At the 13th AZK, Richard Moritz highlighted the increase in children taken into custody, as well as child theft in 2015. Children are becoming commodities without rights. The number of minors taken into care by youth welfare offices in Germany rose from 48,000 to almost 78,000. From 2014 to 2015 alone, baby theft from hospitals increased by 42%. In the USA, the number of children who go missing each year is around 800,000, and worldwide even around 8 million. Other sources even speak of 9 million.
Effects of elite networks in the Jersey and Dutroux cases.
We have seen a lot of interconnections and entanglements in this movie so far. I would like to illustrate with this diagram just how these connected networks worked together in the Jersey case. Red are the perpetrators and cover-ups. Green, the investigators and witnesses. Blue, the victims. I'll show it to you here full screen so that you can study it. On the island of Jersey, hundreds of children are said to have been abused, mistreated, and many even killed, both in children's homes and on yachts on the high seas. Dedicated police officers and a minister made every effort to uncover the case and identify 160 victims and witnesses, and more than 100 suspects, including members of Jersey's political and social elite. But it was precisely this so-called political and media elite that ensured that the courageous whistleblowers were all forced out of office, and their successors then presented the public with exonerating investigation results. The media, which was run by the cover-up politicians, attacked the investigators and ridiculed their findings. In the end, only a few small fish were convicted, but the men with influence remained unscathed, as always. The same processes can be seen in the Dutroux case, where immense efforts were made to portray him as an individual offender. But I wonder how it can be that several of the witnesses were killed in the same time period where the alleged one perpetrator was in prison. Here also a visual representation. This shows that Dutroux, whose name was on everyone's lips, was just the bottom link in the chain. But this network goes all the way up to the Prime Minister, who, together with a network of corrupt police and judicial officials, the Belgian royal family, and the establishment of Belgian big businessmen, stifled any investigation and at the same time hired terrorist groups and assassins to do their dirty work. This network was immensely large. In the meantime, investigators have identified 111 people who were themselves among the perpetrators or who helped to block their exposure.
Overcoming the blood cult.
In this film, we have heard various names of organizations that are said to be embroiled in some way in these satanic practices. Freemasons, Hollywood, Illuminati, Luciferians, Satanists. In episodes 1 to 3 of The Blood Cult, we also encountered victims and witnesses from a wide variety of ideological backgrounds, whether from atheists, the Mormons, Catholics, from Christian communities, or we have been introduced to survivors who could not recognize any ideological background at all in their tormentors. Nevertheless, all survivors unanimously testify that it is an elitist network that has infiltrated all important positions and offices at the highest level, and that these criminal circles are well organized and networked among themselves. Yes, they even cover for each other worldwide and keep each other's backs free so that the network is not exposed. So, who exactly is behind this blood cult, which presents itself worldwide and seems to have infiltrated pretty much all political, ideological, and religious institutions at the top? For it is obvious that neither the Christian faith nor, for example, the lower degrees of Freemasonry have anything to do with these satanic practices. We ask a survivor, Jessie Cespotar, who exactly could be behind it all. She was trained for the Luciferian Brotherhood Illuminati from the age of 4.5. Among other things, she says that high-ranking people travel from one continent to another in super yachts to smuggle children.
But who are the people that are sacrificing these kids? Who are the people that are demanding this? I mean, this is obviously $1 million industry. Who are the people that can afford this? Who are the people that are wanting this?
Well, I think the demand and the, want for really stems from, Satan and the demonic spirits, especially the high demon generals. But serving them are the high, the elite, or who we would call the elite. These are the individuals who are the Illuminati's insurance policy.
So Jessie Cespotar says that the driving force behind this worldwide criminal network is Satan himself and the demonic spirits. This statement is consistent with the vast majority of testimonies of survivors from Blood Cult 1 to 3. These testimonies run through millennia of history, which is described in detail in the Bible, starting with the book of Genesis and all the Luciferian gods such as Baal and Moloch, who have always demanded child sacrifice.
The Bible says Satan will disguise himself as an angel of light, and that's exactly what he does. In this quote, Albert Pike says that all Freemasons from the 30th degree to the 33rd degree are allowed to hear that Lucifer is God. Lucifer is their God.
Let's listen to the ex-magician Christopher Lee, who is also an actor and singer.
It is a fact. It is a fact which has existed for several thousand years. I mean, when we talk about black magic, we are talking about Satanism, necromancy, alchemy, witchcraft, the worship of Satan, the worship of dark forces, whether it's voodoo, juju, whether it's something practiced in the Western world or the Eastern world, it is basically the worship of the force of evil as embodied by Satan, Lucifer, the princes of darkness and their legions and so on. It is a fact. It is a desperately dangerous fact. It does exist. It exists around us today. Satanic ceremonies will be happening tonight, very definitely. Ask any priest, ask any member of the forces of law and order, and they will tell you that Satanism as such, it's there, and it has been for thousands of years.
But as I said, I've certainly never been involved, and I warn all of you, never, never, never. You will not only lose your mind, you lose your soul.
So much for the urgent warning from ex-magician Christopher Lee. The question for us now is whether there is any chance at all of defeating these forces and putting an end to the evil activities of the blood cult. To find an answer to this question, we go to Africa, to one of the highest-ranking Satanists at the time. He has had a very drastic experience in his career as a Satanist, which has led him to change sides. James was consecrated to Satanism already as a baby. He was 3 years old when his only caregiver, his uncle, was slowly and painfully killed in front of his eyes. Under agonizing methods of torture, pain, and ritual abuse, James was trained at a young age for a high position of power in Satanism. One of his most important tasks later on, when he had made his career, was to attack men of God and try to destroy them. He was paid up to $600,000 a year to destroy such powerful light movements. But then he got to know a higher power, against which the whole Satan cult and all its degrees combined had no chance at all.
I was still in the occult, and I was in the city in Kampala, and I remember I got instruction from our leaders to vacate the city and stay away 70 miles away from the city and remove all our operations, because a man of God was coming in the city. And I remember we were told that if we stay in the city where that man is, his prayer would kill us, all convert us. And I remember the instruction was stay out of the city 70 miles away. Wow. But also do not enter the city even 21 days after he has left. 21 days, his power, the effect of his power remains in the atmosphere after 21 days. Wow. He has been in the city. So I was still in the occult, and I was like, what kind of power is this? Because I knew the power, I knew Satan, I knew I had been all in these kind of powers. But then, he had raised a prayer in the nation, and that prayer had cast completely away all the altars of the kingdom of darkness. Wow. He had completely wiped out
the altars.
The altars. Completely. Because I remember I was told, please don't operate. Cease every action and stay away. If they can continue like this and finish their covenant, they are going to secure the gates of the spirit realm and stop satanic operation in the spirit realm.
James went on to say that the only way to weaken the power of such men of God was to sow discord, division, and apostasy in the ranks of the movement. For this assignment, they often researched for a very long time and at great expense to find a gateway to any person close to the man of God. If they managed to drive such people into division or stir up mistrust of such men of God, they often drew many people with them. And the protective wall around the man of God had a gap where they could indirectly weaken him. But as soon as the wall around the man of God was closed again, there was no way through for the Satanists. This experience of the infinite inferiority of the entire satanic cult among these men of God changed his life, and he bowed his knee before Jesus Christ and his servants. He changed sides. That really dramatically moved me, because just as this ex-Satanist described it, my father has been continuously and massively attacked by this cult for decades and defamed, smeared with dirt from all sides because he does all his work directly inspired by God and is always in direct contact with him. That is why this satanic cult has always done everything in its power to slander him and tarnish his name. The people are being incited against him with the most perfidious media campaigns. Fears of him are stirred up, and he is portrayed as a dangerous and violent sect leader. This cult is constantly trying to split off even the closest people from him in order to break up the unity. Because this is the only way the blood cult could destroy a real man of God. But they will not succeed, because God is stronger than Satan, and that is the good news here. He sends his prophets and servants, as he has done for thousands of years, to free mankind from the dominion of Satan. That is why we can break these forces of Satan if we do not allow ourselves to be divided, if we do not allow ourselves to be incited against each other, and form a protective wall around these true men of God. My father is undoubtedly one of these powerful men of God because he stands before God day and night. He founded AZK, for example, almost 20 years ago, then KLA TV, and together with all the other informing educational platforms that have emerged, we have become a really strong and effective weapon against the satanic cult. Because
after the fall of man, God says directly to the face of the serpent, that is the devil, Satan, Lucifer, these are interchangeable terms. He says, "I will crush your head by the seed of man, of flesh and blood."
Be sure to listen to the whole sermon. It's called Update Your Worldview. The link, you can find it at the end of the video description here. Then you'll understand world history and see everything in a panorama, and you will better understand our mission in this world. And you will see that there absolutely is hope. The more people join the God-appointed servants and form a protective wall around them, also in prayer, the more the satanic cult loses its power and is pushed back. And this without weapons and without violence, only through spiritual power. This will increase exponentially as soon as God's servants are surrounded by people with protection and love, and we no longer allow ourselves to be turned against each other. All those who genuinely left behind the satanic cult testify to this, as does the Bible, for example, the Apostle Paul. Damaris from Germany, a survivor of ritual violence, tells how Ivo Sazek's ministry freed her from physical and psychological distress. She encourages all victims, those who've suffered and survivors, that healing is possible. She says, I quote, "I have experienced many years of ritual violence and many subsequent experiences of abuse. I was in great physical and psychological distress, but I was able to experience healing. Through Ivo Sazek, I was able to experience how caring and fatherly God is, that there is a true, loving God who wants to transform me into the image He has of me and not the one I saw through all the things I experienced. I have hundreds of dearest friends who have also experienced deep inner healing under the ministry of Ivo Sazek in the OCG. You can find all the encouraging healing report from Damaris at the link below the video. The survivor of ritual violence, Rodiana, also has an important and hopeful message for all survivors and for all people. The blood cult's perfidious tactics of cruel torture and abuse even make memories disappear. But Rodiana says that we have the ability, without using the mind, to listen to our body, which reacts very clearly when you see or hear a person. Ivo Sasek calls this the navigation system of life, the law of the spirit of life. This means that we have an ability within us that can sense exactly whether a person is emanating life or death, or from a word that is spoken. It is an absolutely reliable navigation principle. It guides us through uplifting, calm peace when a matter is clean. The Bible calls this the peace of God. But this divine life and peace immediately leaves us when something is wrong. So you can use this to discern everything, even if you don't know in your head what is behind a person or what that person has done. You feel it in every fiber of your body, soul, and spirit, as Rodiana says here.
And this way of thinking, this doubt, you simply have to push it aside and learn to understand your own body language, because it doesn't lie. So every cell goes into resonance and everything is stored there. And when I look back at all the stories or people I've met, my body was the first to know. But my head just made it up. No, you can't be rude. It's just this or that problem. Or, I don't know, that's not right. So that's programming. And it's intentional so that they can remain hidden and remain in the occult and continue to be the masterminds. But we have to stop thinking that we can trust ourselves. And that is the most important task of all, to regain this ability, because then the others won't stand a chance.
Exactly, very aptly expressed. Many thanks, dear Rodiana. Let's try that out with our viewers right now. Because we are constantly confronted with people in the media smiling at us in the TV cameras and telling us what to do and what not to do. According to witnesses and victims of the blood cult, it is often precisely these influential and respected people who secretly have abysmal vices and commit absolutely atrocious satanic crimes. Let's test our navigation system of life, which Rodiana and Ivo Sasek have just described to us. We take the example of Mark Benecke and his wife, Ines Azrael Fischer-Benecke. Mark Benecke is presented to us on radio and television as the voice of common sense. There is hardly a talk show that he hasn't been on. He is sold as the criminal biologist par excellence. He has written countless articles and books and has landed on bestseller lists everywhere, received a host of awards, and enjoyed training at the FBI Academy in the USA. Here we see Mark Benecke and his wife, Ines Azrael Fischer, a beautician, promoting the vaccination together, the FFP2 masks, and warning about man-made climate change and the heat. In the spirit of an end-time prophet, Mark Benecke titles his current lectures on the so-called climate crisis, "Time is Up." The end is approaching. We are all melting away. He also promotes the gender agenda quite vividly. His partner, Ines Azrael, promotes the demonstrations against the right on Instagram. Now let's take a quick look inside our bodies and see how it reacts to these people. What does the navigation system of life say about this? Okay, do you have your result? Good. Now to the facts, which you can use to test your feelings in reality. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Tilman Knechtel for his excellent research. So, Mark Benecke is part of a vampire order called Nexus Noctis. In this order, it is customary to drink the blood of other people. His wife, Ines Azrael Fischer, alias Ines Benecke, is the head of the order Nexus Noctis, the largest and oldest active vampire society. Incidentally, both the Temple of Set, Satan Temple, by Satanist Michael Aquino and the Church of Satan by Anton LaVey had an affiliated vampire order. Ines Azrael Fischer, who heads the Order of the Vampire, poses, alongside Benecke, as an expert on all kinds of topics, or is described as a social media expert, even though she is a trained beautician. For example, she's lectured people about corona via the mainstream media and given us clear instructions, for example, that we should get vaccinated, etc. Everywhere she goes, she immediately has a free pass to express her political opinion, and the doors in the media are wide open to her. Her husband, Mark Benecke, is chairman of the German Dracula Society. He writes in his book series, Vampires Among Us, I quote, "There are vampires who have gone underground in our society. I am one of them." End of quote. Mark Benecke is linked to the vampire of Paris, Nico Clau, who murdered and ate 2 people and is now at large again. He runs an online store where he sells T-shirts with serial killer motifs. In prison, he wrote a cannibalistic cookbook, which he also sells diligently. This Nico Clau has recently even praised serial killers in posts on social media. So Mark Benecke does a completely uncritical, sometimes even humorous interview with this cannibalistic murderer who identifies as a vampire. On Benecke's initiative, another cannibal with the nickname Dr. Fleischer was accepted into the Nexus Noctis order, the Blood Drinkers Order. So Mark Benecke associates with cannibals. When math teacher Stefan R. was on trial for killing Stefan T. and dismembering his body to eat parts of it, criminal biologist Mark Benecke made the following statement in a press release. I quote, "The fact that we see cannibalism as the worst thing, that has more to do with our own need for separation than the horror of the thing itself. We want to suppress the fact that we also eat living beings. Eating animals and eating people, from a rational point of view, there is no difference between the two," he concludes. That is absolute mockery of the victims. Mark Benecke trivializes vampirism everywhere and pretends to be an independent expert who has just had a look into the movement. He deliberately conceals the fact that he belongs to the movement in these interviews. In his blog, investigative journalist, research professional, and editor Guido Grant reveals just how, quote-unquote, harmless vampirism really is. In a seemingly endless list, he uncovers real vampire murders nonstop. As a criminal biologist, Mark Benecke is also immediately on the spot when body parts are stolen or major homicides occur anywhere in the world. He is immediately interviewed on television and quoted in the print media as a leading expert. As a self-confessed vampire and confidant of cannibalistic murderers, what is he doing at these crime scenes? The fact that he has close ties to the Russian Secret Service and was trained at the FBI Academy in the USA is also rather suspicious. It's even reminiscent of Epstein's connections to the secret services. An important witness to satanic ritual violence, Victor, says that during investigations, the criminal police and the public prosecutor's office simply find nothing at the crime scenes, and the evidence categorically disappears. For example, when the police carry out house searches at the perpetrator's home, the perpetrators are informed in advance because they are not individual offenders but well-organized and protected groups, some of which include police and members of the judiciary. The public prosecutor's office then claims the opposite in the final report of the investigation. Victor goes on to say that Swiss television, SRF, and the print media are conducting an aggressive campaign to protect perpetrators, because despite all the cover-ups by the infiltrated authorities, more and more outrages are coming to light. Victor's conclusion is getting informed is important. So be sure to watch my program, Satanist Scandal, Swiss TV, and Robin Raymond's Satanic Panic. But not only is evidence disappearing at the crime scenes, Witnesses and activists who want to expose such crimes are also under massive attack, publicly ridiculed or paralyzed. Police investigators Lenny Harper and Graham Power have been removed from the investigations into the abuse scandal surrounding the Haute-la-Garenne Children's Home on the Channel Island of Jersey. They wanted to expose over 60 years of sexual abuse of children, their torture and murder. The renowned forensic anthropologist Julie Roberts explained, among other things, a bone fragment of a child's skull was found there in the children's home by cadaver-sniffing dogs. Shortly afterwards, this piece of evidence disappeared, and it was reported in the media that it was not a child's skull, but a shell from a coconut. Stuart Sivret, a Jersey cabinet minister who tried to expose the background to the Haute-la-Garenne scandal, was vilified and stripped of his ministerial post. At this point, I'm very happy to endorse the words of Joachim Hagopians, a clinical psychologist, therapist, and independent journalist.
No matter how hard the established institutions, be it the judiciary or the corporate media, try to deny, deflect, and cover up this heinous reality of rampant child sexual abuse, the truth always wins in the end.
And that's exactly how it is, dear viewers. The truth always wins in the end. And that's why it's so essential that the survivors break their silence. I thank the 385 survivors and 212 witnesses from Blood Cult 1 to 3 for having the courage to break the silence and show their faces. You are the heroes of our time. We love you and we need you.
It takes one generation to break that cycle. That's why I did this. This is why I'm waging this war. I'm trying to be a living witness to people on how to fight against this. And you're made to be brave.
Only if we break the silence can this stop. And only then does it really come to light. And it also gives other survivors the courage to go on living. Healing is possible, and I simply want to be a courageous example and a good example, a shining example for all those who are still in the healing process and are still deep in the valley of tears. But healing is possible, and then you have a fulfilled life with depth and flights of fancy and a fullness that is, yes, wonderful. That is a gift. Life is a gift.
Thank you so much, dear Dea Heibel, for these encouraging closing words. And this brings us to the end of our documentation. My appeal to you all is, let's return to our navigation system of life. It is imperative that we stick to the light carriers who emanate uplifting power, regardless of what is said about them in the media, for example, or what defamers say about them. Let's learn to listen to our hearts again and to feel the energy, whether it's uplifting and drawing us up or pulling us down, what emanates from people, before we allow ourselves to be incited against each other. Because when all light-filled souls unite, the blood cult has no chance and is defeated.
Yes, the time is ripe. The times will be very, very stormy for these archontic beings. And that is not a threat. We are writing history, and this story will end well this time.
Ich schau auf das, was vor mir steht, wie ein Berg mitten im Weg. Ich will dir folgen, Herr, deinen Weg gehen. Aber Gott, jetzt scheint mir, das sei doch viel zu schwer. Aber du bist ja da und du trägst mich. Ja, du trägst mich hoch, gerade auf diesen hohen Berg. Jesus, du bist ja da und du trägst mich. was mich traurig macht, was mich fragen lässt, warum. Vielleicht werde ich kantig, vielleicht werde ich still. Dabei reicht ein Blick hoch zu dir. Und ich weiß, du bist ja da und du trägst mich. Herr, du bewahrst mich und lässt mich nie allein. Ich weiß, du bist ja da und du trägst mich. Was immer passiert, will ich mich freuen in dir. Du bist der Einzige, der einen nie betrügt. Ja, ich bin sicher, dass du mich nie belügst. Du bist der Einzige, der so viel verspricht. Du bist der Einzige, der sein Wort nicht bricht. Wie oft schon habe ich Hilfe gekriegt, Hilfe von dir aus jeder Not. Ich habe erlebt, was in der Bibel steht, dass du mich lenkst bei jedem Schritt. Herr, lass diese Einsicht doch ganz tief in mir sich verwurzeln und immer fort in mir bewirken, dass ich aus Furcht vor dir